at least for all the mental abilities, including general mental ability, there's extensive research in the EU done by Salgado and Anderson and some others. So, and they find perfect generalizability to all these European countries. They get the same results that we got in the Canada and the US, so forth. Now, some of the others, like maybe so-called emotional intelligence, are person, job, fit, so on. Those have not been studied all over, you might say, Western civilization. So that probably should be done, and probably the finding will be that it does generalize, not only with a correlation, but very, very similar ones. Well, let me give you an example from long ago. A big American oil company, Exxon, had, and I think they developed a biodata questionnaire to predict promotion rate for managers. Biodata, very empirically oriented. An item is retained if it correlates with the criterion, which was rate of promotion. Okay, and they had it's a global company. In this particular case, they wanted to know if this biodata would be a method would be this instrument would be as valid in South America as it was in the United States, and they thought it wouldn't be, but it turned out to work just as well. There, one we know that doesn't generalize anywhere and is used a lot in France and Israel. That's graphology. That's in the paper, and it doesn't work at all. But the Israelis and the French use it frequently. Another contention has been that high IQ people turn over. They quit. They get bored and they leave. They quit. Okay. We did a big study on that, and it wasn't true at all. In fact, the high IQ people had a longer tenure, stayed on the job longer, probably because their performance was better. But we didn't have a situation in which research PhDs were applying for a janitor job. Okay, they would get bored and quit, but they don't apply for that job. It's due to the availability of a more accurate method for correcting for range restriction. There was a lot of new data, but it was the same as before. The results were the same, and there was a lot of U.S. military data, and they had already been able to use correction for indirect range restriction, which other people couldn't use because they had all the data on the military conscripts, or actually it's volunteer now. So they could use an even more accurate estimate of more accurate correction for indirect range restriction. But it gave the same result as the one we used, which, but in any event, we published extensive computer simulation studies showing that this method was much more accurate than the previous method. The previous method, which was direct range restriction correction, that gave the 0.55 or 0.56. And our simulation study showed that method underestimates validity. It doesn't fully correct for range restriction. And the new one, so it's almost entirely due to the development of a better correction for range restriction. It was for me too. In the paper, we explain in detail why this is the case and how it happened. And we, in effect, issued a challenge to anyone that wanted to try to show that was not correct. Because we've shown the method of making the correction for range restriction. That's what caused the increase. That is accurate. And the correction for range restriction was larger in unstructured interview than in structured, because the unstructured interview has a lower reliability. And that reliability it was about 0.40. And it's the correlation between interview scores produced by two different interviewers interviewing the same group of people on different days. So it takes into account all kinds of measurement error, three main kinds. And let me put it this way. If the agreement had not been 0.40, suppose it had been 0.65, then we would have a smaller estimated validity for the unstructured interview. And in order to, it won't be possible for me to explain exactly how this correction works, this range restriction correction, but it's described in detail in an article that's cited in the paper. And all the equations are presented and everything. And okay, so everyone is shocked. We were shocked by this result, but we went over it many times, and it always came out the same. And so we challenge anyone who doesn't believe it to prove they're right. It may turn out to be correct that the quasi-ipsative approach works better. But if you look at the data in the paper, there's very few studies. Some of the meta-analyses are based on 2 or 3 studies. So it will take a while in the future to gather the additional data to make that really convincing. But we cite 2 different ways in the paper to increase the validity of personality tests. There's a really big increase if you have the personality test filled out by other people and not the person. We mentioned that, but it's not a meta-analysis, just several studies, so we don't have it in there. And the other is a very simple thing. On every personality question, you say, at work, how do you behave? At work, So it's not just general, it's at work. And that produces increase in validity. So those 2 things they work. And the quasi-ipsative approach may work, and you might be possible to use all 3 of them together.